Hello and welcome to our Winter Wildlife 2024 live stream. I'm coming to you live from the Discovery Space in the Museum of Zoology. And with it being National Tree Week this week, today we are going to be talking all things trees. Now behind me are a couple of displays that show some of our local woodlands, and they're two very different local woodlands. So behind me on this side, here we've got an image of Hayleywood, which is an ancient woodland just outside of Cambridge. And on this side, here we've got Thetford Forest with its coniferous trees. Now these woodlands support loads and loads of wildlife. And on our displays, we've got lots of the birds. So I'm just going to show you a few of them now. But some of you that are eagle-eyed might just be able to spot, although it's might be a little bit too high. We've got a jay up there. There it is. There's our jay. And jays are the most colourful members of the crow family. I think it's really spectacular when you see that bright blue flash on their wings when they take flight. And this time of year is a great time to go and look for jays because they are going around caching food for the winter, so they'll be a bit more obvious than they are usually. They're a bit shy otherwise. A couple of the other birds we've got in here, I will tell you it's here. You might want to look it up later if you've not seen one before, but just up here we've got a little bird called a nuthatch. It's one of my absolute all-time favourites. It's got this beautiful slatey grey-blue back and this apricot peachy pinky coloured chest. And these birds always seem a bit fearless to me because they climb headfirst down tree trunks. They're really fabulous. And then just below our nuthatch down here, we've got a couple of winter migrant thrushes. So these are birds that come to the UK to escape the extreme cold of places like Iceland and Scandinavia. So it may feel chilly outside today, but it's nothing like as cold as it is in those places. And they come and visit us in the winter and feed on our bounty of berries and things like that. So what we have in here is our smallest thrush species in the UK. It's a redwing, and this is a real say what you see bird species because it's got a patch of red on its wings, this russet coloured feathers on its wings. And then next to it we have a much bigger bird called the fieldfare. So they're both migrant thrushes that you might see today. So trees do loads and loads and loads for our wildlife, and they also do loads for our well-being. And later we'll be joined by tree expert Kenny McGregor, who is all set to answer your questions, so do put them in the comments on YouTube. But first, before we get into that, I thought we'd start by looking at some of the trees that you can find in the collections at the University of Cambridge, starting with a wonderful example from the Living Collection at the Botanic Garden.
Hello, welcome to Cambridge University Botanic Garden. My name's Hannah and I work here, and I wanted to tell you about this amazing tree that's behind me. It's called a Persian ironwood. It is native to Iran and Azerbaijan, and apparently the population of it in the wild is decreasing according to the IUCN Red List, so it's classed as near threatened. It's quite a slow growing tree, so this one here was actually planted in the 1880s, so it's been growing on this site for really quite a long time. And it's got some really interesting features that make me always want to show this tree to people who are visiting the garden. It's got this incredible patterned bark that you can see, and also its branches do something really amazing. Where they cross each other, they actually start to self-graft, so the branches look like an amazing lattice work when you look up at them. The other interesting thing about the wood of this tree is that it's really, really dense. The clue is kind of in the name. It is called ironwood, so we would expect it to be very hard wood. But when you put some of this wood into water, it will actually sink, which is again pretty unusual. We would expect something we remember maybe from our primary school science experiments, that if we put wood on water it would usually float.
The ginkgo tree, also known as the maidenhair tree in the United Kingdom, is one of the oldest living tree species in the world. It is the sole survivor of an ancient group of trees which outlived the dinosaurs. This particular ginkgo leaf fossil is from the Jurassic period, making it between 145 and 213 million years old. It is nearly identical to the ginkgo leaves of today. In fact, the ginkgo tree species is so ancient it is also known as a living fossil.
We've actually got lots of different trees in the Zoology Museum. and not something people would normally think about in a zoology museum, but we've got loads. Birds are standing on them. It's not really a tree museum, we've just got lots of trees. But we've also got lots of animals that look like trees. Here's a bittern, and this does look a bit like a tree, but it shouldn't anyway. It lives in reeds and stuff, so it's not really tree-like. But up here, our eagle owl definitely has a lot more tree camouflage. Our tawny owl, look, there he is. Perfect. And then if you just look a little bit to the right, we have a part of a tree as well. And that's our lesser-spotted woodpecker. And that's a very tree-related animal. It's a very rare animal in the UK, to be fair. But there you can see drilling holes in trees. Okay, so I forgot the best one. And here it is. This is the nightjar. And the nightjars are amazing birds. They come here from Africa. I've never seen one. They're not active during the day, and during the day they'll sit still over their nest, which they make on the ground. They don't make nests in trees, and as you can tell, you just can't see them because their feathers look like bark or a log or a wood or a trunk of a tree, and even like leaves as well. And so they're so hard to spot, and it's so detailed. The camouflage here. Let's see if we can zoom in. See how perfect they've evolved to blend in with a woodland habitat.
Now, we only just scratched the surface there. There are loads of trees in the university's collections. Do you have a favourite tree-related object in the museum anywhere? Do let us know in the comments. We would love to share them. So we do actually have an actual living tree here at the Museum of Zoology. Now, it's not inside the galleries. I mean, we're lacking some key essentials like sunlight and soil in here, but it's just outside our main entrance. So as you come up to see the whale, you'll see our beautiful silver birch tree. And we were inspired to try and create and capture our tree in a fun and easy way. And here's something you might like to try at home.
Outside the museum is a silver birch tree, and over the last few weeks we've watched its leaves turn a beautiful golden colour. To celebrate our lovely tree, we collected some of the fallen leaves to make rubbings. You could try this at home too. Flatten out your leaf and place a piece of paper over it. Take a wax crayon and, using the side, rub over the surface. It will pick up lots of lovely details from the leaf below. Practice makes perfect. You can use a colour like this, or why not try something a bit different? Try a white crayon. I went over and over this leaf to make sure I didn't miss any of it. Then paint over your rubbing with a water-based paint. I used watercolour here, but watered down acrylic or gouache would work too. The waxy bits repel the paint, and our leaf magically appears. I cut out my leaves and stuck them to some scrap card. This is an old file divider. Then used paper tape and twine to make a garland and some gift tags. What might you make with yours?
Do you have a favourite tree you could try that with? I might give it a go with leaves from the sycamore that is in the park behind my house. Now, as this sycamore is in a public space in Cambridge, it is a tree that is looked after by our guest tonight and his team. So Kenny McGregor is a tree officer for Cambridge City Council and an amazing font of knowledge on all things arboreal. To you and me, that means he knows loads about trees. He will be joining us live in just a few minutes to answer all of your tree-related questions, so do put them in the comments on YouTube. But first, I met with Kenny a couple of weeks ago on Cofen, where he introduced me, and now you, to the wonderful world of walking willows.
Hi, my name's Kenny McGregor. I'm a tree officer from Cambridge City Council. Trees start off as quite young, got saplings, then they establish and they become early mature. And then when they get slightly bigger, they get maturity, as big as they can possibly get. And then when they get to that sort of size, they start to enter into their older age, where they get over mature and they start to die back a little bit and they start to retrench down, so they start to grow down. And they might bush out in the middle and they might give up their upper crown. Once they get past that, they can start to veterinise, which is where they slowly fall apart. And this is a good example of what willows, once they fall apart, they have this ability to strike or grow into the ground where the wood or the fallen timber hits the floor, and they can regrow into new trees. And with willows, that's what in folklore they call that walking willows. Trees veterinise and they become ancient because they live even longer and they have lots of decaying features or wildlife habitats, lots of rock pockets and holes. So this one once was a complete whole tree. That section has slowly decayed away, and this tree has basically left this section for one reason or another, and that has now fallen and grown, set its roots underneath here, and it is happily carried a fantastic habitat for birds and bats, all sorts of invertebrates, so your bugs and your beasties, as well as a lot of mycology, so lots of fungi and bacterium, which are all part of our natural wildlife. Here, and this is a good example of a willow walking out, so that's starting to root where that stem is laying, and then you've got the new tree regrowing out of that, and they will form very large willow trees. It's simple as that. Yeah, out of all of these stems you will have a new willow that will achieve a great size and height, and then it will do the same as these. It will slowly start to retrench, break down, and it will walk off. It goes again. When we had lots of tree work carried out on the other trees and pollarding, we put a big circle of wood of the timber that we got from the other trees. And that was to keep the cattle away from this lovely, fresh, veterinising willow tree in the middle. And that worked. That tree has got away. It's established about the cows eating it completely. But cows love willow. It's one of their main foods, or a tradition it used to be. And yeah, we managed to hold on to this tree. So that's another fantastic feature habitat for our wildlife around Cambridge. If you come and look at this side, unfortunately it suffered a horrible bit of vandalism. But that doesn't bother a willow tree. You can see by all the gnarls and the bumps and the lumps on the other side that we looked at. It's just supporting itself, it's just holding onto its structure, it's growing out to support its weight. And it's got lots of lovely new growth on top where we've pollarded it, removed the weight. Pollarding is where we reduce the crown to excite all this new growth. And yeah, it helps stabilise the tree so it won't fall over so quickly. So inside there, what we think caught fire was basically all the decomposing wood from inside, because all willows have that, they readily do that. And I think somebody set that alight and it's traced it all out. But as I said before, the growing cambium part of the tree is still alive, so the willow is keeping on going.
Okay, and now I'm joined by Kenny here in the museum. Hello and welcome. It's great to have you.
Hello, how you doing? Thank you for having me along.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about your job and how you got into this line of work?
Right, okay, so I'm a tree officer. We look after 33,000 trees, plus, in counting, in the city of Cambridge.
Oh, that's a lot of trees.
Yes, and we have a method to look at each one of those trees in a 3-year cycle. And essentially what we're looking for is to make sure they're safe, make sure they're healthy, or health check the tree, and we record that. And yeah, it goes around in a 3-year cycle. There's 2 of us doing it, and we look after parks trees, street trees, and trees and property that the council owned, etc., etc. The list goes on.
So you look at, I'm doing my maths here, it's 5,000 trees each a year then?
Roughly speaking, yeah.
Wow,
yeah,
that's a lot of trees.
And there's other members of my team as well that look after the tree protection side of things, and they are more often than not private trees, and we call them tree preservation orders. So you have to apply to work on those trees, and they overlook that as well. So yeah, essentially wherever there's a tree, we get involved.
Okay, that's great. And where did your love of trees? I mean, you must love trees to do this job.
Yes, from the age of 8. My grandfather was a saw doctor in New Zealand. Before that, he was a forester. I kind of always looked at that, and I holidays to Thetford Forest.
Yeah.
We had, it's called the Great Fen Project now, but we had Home Woods and Woodwalton Fen just down the road from where I live.
Yeah.
So me and my brother would get on our bikes and we'd cycle down to these woods, and sometimes wild camp, or just spend a lot of time in that environment. So yeah, it's all I wanted to do. So yeah.
Oh, it's great. There's a job where you can do it. It's brilliant. So in your video, we saw you describe the walking willows on Coe Fen.
Okay.
Are willows the only trees that do this? Is there something special about willows?
Willows are the most likely to do it quite easily,
Yeah.
and that's because they've got, this is a fancy word coming up, very active meristematic tissue. They're really capable of root and shoot growth from within their bark.
Okay.
There's hormones that kick that off, but it's a survival strategy for them, or even a colonisation strategy. So they try and cover an area. Obviously, there's still fruit and seed, which keeps their diversity fresh.
Yeah.
But they are capable of dealing with really harsh waterlogged circumstances, or sometimes if you're out on a washland or a fenland or by a river, sometimes you get drought periods, so they can put up really dry, arid conditions as well. They're a real survivor.
Yeah, because I mean, Coe Fen, I mean, when we went out there, it was quite boggy, but it does dry out.
Absolutely.
As well,
we know
doesn't
what
it?
some of our English summers have been like.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are other trees that do it. Beech do it as well. Most trees will do it. Actually, the horse chestnut at the front of King's College Chapel.
That's doing it at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, so they are, if you leave them long enough, some of the trees that live longer will do it also, but it has to be the right environment. Whereas willow, you could snap off quite a thick branch, stick it in the ground, and it will grow.
Oh,
so
that's great.
they're quite tough.
Quite fantastic. So we think of trees, I mean, you just mentioned there, sort of longer lived trees. We think of trees living a long time, and I have to confess I grew up next to an ancient oak woodland.
Yes,
so
beautiful.
Those trees were pretty old,
Yes.
like hundreds of years old.
Yep.
How old do willows tend to live? I mean, are they a bit faster,
yeah, they're really, we call them live fast, die young trees.
Yeah.
But they live the similar sort of age as a human, perhaps slightly longer. So a very old willow tree will be 100, maybe 120, sometimes 150.
Yeah.
But what you have to remember, oaks are very different. They're very slow growing, and they take hundreds and hundreds of years to get to what we call a veteran age tree. But willows, yeah, they take a lot less time, and they rot out and do all sorts of lovely things with, to aid habitat. But yeah, no, they don't live as long as people think they live.
Yeah.
That's the key thing. Is trees have, like most species, have obviously a different demographic of life. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting. So they grow quite. You'll get quite a few big-sized willows quite quickly.
Very quickly. Yes. Yeah.
Now, when I think of trees in Cambridge, and I do love the trees in Cambridge, I think there are a few species that really come to mind for me. So there's the willows, obviously. They're the beautiful avenues of plane trees.
Yes, along Jesus Green,
along
yeah.
Jesus Green and Sidgwick Avenue and
Yeah.
places like that. And then there's the horse chestnuts, like the one you mentioned, in front of King's. And I also have to say I love the lime trees because they smell so nice in the
They
summer
do,
and the
absolutely,
nights.
yeah.
Do these trees pose different challenges for your team, or is it kind of similar things that you're doing for all of them?
Yeah, each tree has potentially a different problem, or a different pathogen can attack them.
Yeah.
So the ones on Jesus Green, the plains, they can suffer from a minor pathogen called Missaria, which decays the top of the lateral lower branches. So we have to check that, make sure they don't fall off and hurt people across the footpath. So we have to look out for that. We have to send tree surgeons along to just check on top of the branch, the big branches. Willows, as we were talking, they like to fall apart.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful. We have to pollard those.
Yeah.
So that's a different style of management. Not all of them. So if we've got a willow in the middle of say, Cofen and Sheep's Green where we look, we're not so fast. We're quite happy for that to break away and do what it wants to do. But in the city on Midsummer Common, we're currently pollarding some of those because some of them have started to peel away.
Oh.
And lime trees, they're really quite robust. You can pollard them, you can leave them alone, you can pleach them into flat lines and almost have a high hedge type situation. Long answer short is, you have to know your trees.
You have to know
and the species and what they're susceptible to, and what kind of growing environment they will tolerate as well.
Yeah.
That's quite critical.
Yeah. Were there any important ones that I missed off my list there?
Oh, we've got loads. I don't even know.
Too many to count.
And part of our key objective is to make sure we've got a huge diversity of trees, because of issues with ash and ash dieback disease. So we've still got a stock of trees that could, kind of, even if we lost that species completely, we've still got good stock of trees generally.
Did we used to have lots of elms in Cambridge at all?
We did.
Yeah.
And we're planting elms again.
Really?
We've got resilient. No, they're not completely. They can still get Dutch elm, but they're not so badly affected.
Yeah.
So they're more resilient to it. And they are called the Ulmus New Horizons.
Yeah.
And we're using them in the streets.
Okay.
They grow really quick, really, really quickly. They're incredible. Even in hot weather, a couple of years ago, they were still growing quite happily. So they're a good urban tree.
Okay.
So yes, they're slowly coming back into the city situation.
Oh, that's nice to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm asking so many of my questions. I'm so curious, but we've had some from the audience. So we had one that was an early question from N. Campbell saying, she wanted to ask what impact lack of access to water in gardens is having on birds or wildlife. What impact would encouraging use of bird baths have? And also, so I guess related to that is there other ways that trees help with that as well? Yeah,
because basically the trees do have cavities and rock pockets.
Yeah.
They're a bit smelly, but they do hold a vessel of water within inside them, especially beech trees. I remember when I was a student, we found one, as we were climbing it, my foot slipped and I popped my foot into this wet cavity and it smelled goodness awful. But yes, no, and don't forget that trees within crowns, they hold lots of water as well in rain.
Yeah.
So
they're really good. But in terms of, it's one of the things I always recommend to people when they're asking about supporting their wildlife. Put some water out for them, particularly in hot summers. I just have a little bird bath because I don't have very much space, but even that I get flocks of birds coming to it and things like that, and it helps so much because they get dehydrated really easily. It's really good. And in the winter it'll freeze over, so go out and break the ice so that they've got access to water to drink as well. So it's a really good thing to do. I guess related to that is, because we're a museum of zoology, of course, and trees, we'd usually say are botany, but I think they're super important for all of wildlife. I was wondering, have you seen any interesting animals or anything like that whilst you've been doing your work?
Squirrels.
What's a squirrel?
When I was a tree surgeon, squirrels were quite active, and when you climb into their environment, They're very comfortable at telling you exactly what they think of you.
Yeah. They do make a racket,
yeah,
don't they?
they do. Yeah. I'm really into the saprophytic beetles. So they're the beetles that live on dead wood. I don't know much about them.
Yeah.
But obviously the invertebrates and the creepy crawlies within trees are incredible. And I often think, what on earth is that? What on earth is that? As I'm pulling them out my hair.
Take a photo and send it to us, and we'll get our guys to check.
But yeah, all sorts, bats as well.
Yeah.
Pipistrelles are really small. They can hide under the slightest piece of bark, and you'll never see them. They're incredible. But you could, especially in the evenings, they'll just shoot out.
Yeah.
So yeah, all sorts. Absolutely.
Fantastic. I'm going to ask you a few more of our questions from the audience. So Dusty Cole asks, are there other trees that do the same or similar thing to the walking willows?
Like I said earlier, not as well as a willow kind of spreads itself out, but trees will layer, we call it, where they drop a branch or snap a branch, and as long as it's connected, it will have a potential to regrow. Or if a tree sometimes falls on its side and half the crown is crushed into the soil, and then there's obviously what used to be lateral branches now become vertical branches. I've seen that on oak trees at Home Fen as well, because it's lovely rich peat ground soil. So yes, most trees will do it, but I think with other species it has to be more of a chance, whereas willows will just do it readily.
Just do it all the time.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I was really quite taken with this sort of, you can see why there's so much folklore, and then you've got Shakespeare and your Tolkien talking about trees that move, and you can see it.
Yeah, and they're the most, I think they're the most active in that sort of manner, that kind of behaviour.
Yeah. So another question, what is the most unusual tree in our public spaces and parks, and which is the oldest? And that comes from Jude in Sydney.
In Cambridge, I think the one that captures my imagination, because we're a fenland landscape, we've kind of only got about 2, maybe 300-year-old trees, because most of it was kind of washland and fenland around us. But the one that I like the most, that's always worth a visit, and it's probably I think it's one of the champion trees, is the Emmanuel plane tree at Emmanuel College.
Okay.
And that's layering as well. That's walking as well, and that is absolutely beautiful.
Where is that?
It's within the college gardens at Emmanuel College.
Yeah.
The bursars, if you ask politely, the bursars will let you through.
Oh.
I'm going
to go and ask.
It is absolutely staggering. So that's probably one of the ones with the most cultural reference in the city. Just on the outskirts, there is a veteran oak at Eddington, and we think that's probably about 600 years old.
Wow.
So that might be probably the oldest.
Yeah.
That's just on the outskirts of the city.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's fenced off to prevent compaction, and the development was carefully placed around it. But go and have a look. It is.
Oh, I'll have to go check that one out, Jude in Sydney. The veteran oak in Eddington. Might be a bit easier to get to than Emmanuel College, but
yes.
Talk nicely to the porters, and they might know.
Absolutely,
So, here's an interesting question by Akbal Hussain. Who invented the word tree? I mean, that's interesting.
Ooh.
Do we know about the etymology of it? Might have to look that one up afterwards.
I know arbor is a French word, as we're arboriculturalists.
Yeah.
But no, I don't. I don't know that one.
Okay. We'll look it up. We'll look it up.
I might have to be educated
and put it on the blog afterwards. We'll see if we can find an answer for you, Akbal. And Zoe asks, what trees have the deepest roots?
Oh, this is a really good question, because trees don't have deep roots.
Don't they?
No, they only go down the first kind of half a metre, maybe nearly a full metre in the top part of the soil. There's not much air or water down below.
Yeah.
They do have a taproot, but again that sets off and then stops, and then everything goes laterally outwards.
Okay.
But trees want air, they want water as well. If you ever look at a tree falling over in a woodland, they fall over and you've got a flat pan. The best way to describe a tree is like a wine glass, if you've got the vessel, long stem, and then a flat base.
Yeah.
So they don't go that deep.
They don't go that deep?
No.
Okay. Wow, that's not what I was expecting, when you get some things that's
Yeah.
so huge. Are the roots deeper when the tree's bigger at the top? So something like a sequoia, would that have deeper
No,
roots?
they're like
not
guide ropes
then.
on the tent. You have to be careful because if you cut through them, that
Yeah.
destabilises the
Yeah,
tree.
okay,
So
yeah.
no, they don't go deep.
Fascinating. I'm learning so much today. So we've got another question from Akbal Hussein, actually. What's your favourite tree?
Oh, there's loads. Obviously the willows, the amount of work I'm doing with the willows and learning so much. Currently I'm really loving wild service trees, Sorbus torminalis, because they're quite rare in their natural environment. And in Cambridgeshire, at Monkswood especially, we've got them growing wild. They've got a lovely maple leaf, even though they're related to the rowan tree. They've got a lovely maple leaf, and the autumn colour is just amazing. Yeah, probably wild service. I'll go with that, wild service. But I like them all.
I know, it's when somebody asks me my favourite animal, I can never choose. I have to ask you, I think this year I've really noticed the autumn colours.
Yes.
They've been really good. And they've lasted quite a long time, and I'm surprised that there are still any leaves left on the trees after this weekend.
Yeah, I know, yeah. Well, you always
Massive
get
winds.
Yeah, you do get a storm in the autumn generally.
Yeah.
I think it's because it has been so still. We've not had
Okay.
any hard frosts either.
Right.
Some people try and predict when you're going to have a good autumn colour, but it's so hard. It really is.
Yeah.
But that's what I think.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah, I was wondering because it just seems to have been particularly good this year, not just they've
No,
not just all
it
turned
has
brown
been
and dropped off.
Absolutely great. Yeah.
So I've got another question. How many types of trees are there? Is that in the world? I think this is again from Akbar. We've got some really good questions from you. Well,
I don't know. There must be thousands and thousands.
Yeah.
In the UK, native tree-wise, I think we've only got about 36 or 37.
Okay, not that many.
And there's only a handful of those that are big canopy trees or big trees.
Yeah.
Which is why we've got lots of non-native trees growing in the cities.
Yeah.
Because collectors, such as
Yes.
various explorers have brought them back, and that's not a new thing by any means. That's been going on since the Roman times.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Because I mean, horse chestnut's not a native. Or
No, they're not native. Yep.
Yeah,
You'll be surprised how many trees are not native.
Not native.
Yeah.
So Sam Connor asks, "Hi, I would love to know what is the oldest species of tree in the UK?"
Yew tree.
Yew tree.
Yes,
okay.
there. I knew I'd get this one actually. I anticipated this.
Yeah.
So I think there is a yew in Scotland. I think it's in Perthshire. That is, they think a minimum of 2,000 years old.
Wow.
To 3,000, but some estimate 5,000
Gosh.
years old. So it's the yew tree in this country.
The yew tree. Do they get older than that elsewhere as well, or? Is that
Possibly, yeah. Trees have. This is actually a really important point, because trees have this ability to avoid death. I think I said this to you, which is an amazing thing to say. So, again, going to the willows, what once was the original willow, you've got to remember it's all part of the same tissue and wood where it regrows. So, yew trees. When you see a 2,000-year-old yew tree, it's normally a big circle of yew trees, where the original tree is gone. So the roots and are still kind of slowly growing.
It's amazing. Just imagine all the history that these trees have seen.
Yes.
It's incredible. Yeah. Finn asks, is there anywhere that will take saplings we have grown from local seeds, e.g. oaks?
Oh, blimey, we get this a lot. You'd have to speak to various landowners. There's no sure. We're actually quite full up. It's really hard for us to sometimes squeeze trees into the city.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Is that from Finn?
That's from Finn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But do try perhaps your Woodland Trust or a Wildlife Trust and National Trust, places like that. They might do.
Yeah. But Cambridge is getting quite full of trees then.
We'll always keep going. We'll always try and squeeze more. But yeah.
Yeah. And Libby asks, in the light of it getting Christmassy, how can tree branches withstand the weight of snow? How much snow could a branch take before snapping? Oh, that's an interesting question.
That is really good.
Yeah.
We're lucky we don't get that much snow in this country. Depends also on how cold it gets, because sometimes the wood gets brittle.
Yeah.
But if you look at some species of tree, especially in Scandinavia, they have a formation where they droop, and those are actually snow-proof because they've had to evolve to put up with that weight of snow.
Yeah.
So it depends what kind of tree. In this country, if we had a real hard snowfall, I think a few trees might suffer.
Yeah.
So especially some of the cedar trees, the Atlantic cedar, because they're really flat.
Oh, that must
we've
like
had we've had some of those over the years break apart.
Yeah.
But yeah, it depends on the species and how harsh the weather is.
Yeah, I'd never thought of the wood. So the wood gets more brittle. Then
It can do, yeah.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I've got loads of questions. This is great. What's the best tree type or size to see birds of prey nesting or roosting? That's from Finn, aged 6.5. Thanks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so what you want for birds of prey, because I like birds of prey as well, are your tallest trees, Douglas firs, especially in Scotland. Really tall spruces and pines and things like that. And they actually like dead trees as well, because they can see all the prey beneath them.
Oh, there's no leaves in the way.
Yeah, and they're eagle-eyed as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, generally your spruces, pines, and very tall conifer trees.
Yeah. Okay, good tip there. And Libby asks, how do birds choose which trees are perfect for building their nest?
Oh, blimey! Depends which bird. Again, birds of prey, they will choose that high, tall tree.
Yeah.
It's safe, and also they can see their prey beneath them. I know lots of smaller birds, they like all the scrub, hedges, and what we call understory, which is like hazel and hawthorn and things like that, because it's safe. The little birds can hide away inside, build a nest. So it depends on what species, how big the bird is.
Yeah, and then there's trees that have holes in, very helpful for things like owls.
Woodpeckers,
and woodpeckers.
owls, things like that. Yeah, they prefer obviously cavities. Yeah.
Okay, Zoe asks, which trees have the biggest and the smallest leaves, and which tree's wood is mostly used for paper?
Oh, paper. Paper is spruce.
Okay.
They call it a cash crop because it grows quite quickly.
Yeah.
So it would have been mostly spruce. That's what they use for paper. And the biggest leaves,
and smallest leaves. Yeah.
The biggest leaves are the Indian bean tree in this country.
Yeah.
They have huge leaves. You've got them on Christ pieces. And a few other places.
Mm-hmm. How big are the leaves?
They're big.
Wow.
They're lovely. They're gorgeous.
Yeah.
And the smallest leaves are something called a Northophagus, which I can't remember. It's a member of the beech tree family.
Okay.
They're quite hard to grow in Cambridge, but they're quite small.
Okay.
They might be smaller. Obviously, needles on pines.
Needles,
but an actual leaflet, I would say probably the Northophagus.
Okay, Northophagus. Have to remember that one. And Sam Connor says, which tree supports the most biodiversity?
Oak trees in this country.
Oak trees,
hands down. The English oak, the pedunculate, or the sessile oaks. They're the biggest supporter of biodiversity.
Yeah.
Closely followed, they think, by white willow trees, because I think the willows, they all crack and break and they're quite scruffy.
Yeah.
But oaks, definitely.
I mean, I have to say, I do love. This is going to sound really weird. I do love seeing a bit of dead wood or a dead tree, because just watching it and having the wildlife sort of take over is fantastic.
It's so important actually. Even if you've got a small garden, collect some logs or twigs, stick them away in a corner for all your bugs and beasties and your fungi as well, and all sorts of stuff. So
if you want to see something like a centipede or a millipede, find a log and lift it up, because they love places like that underneath. This one's a nice question. From Neve, aged 3. Which species is the best for hugging? I mean, I guess you must get to hug quite a few trees.
I do, I'll throw my arms around a fair few. Probably beech trees, because they're quite smooth.
Yeah.
Though I do prefer a hornbeam. I think they're very similar to a beech, but they're a bit.
Okay.
So beech or hornbeam
They've
trees.
not got sharp bits sticking out.
No, they're very
Yeah,
smooth
very
bark.
smooth.
Yeah,
Lovely. Okay. Now, Kirsty asks, does the council take account the mycorrhizal network? Now there is research showing that trees communicate with each other. This is amazing stuff, isn't it?
This is something I'm deeply interested in. The mycorrhizae is quite hard to trace. The research is ongoing, but it is important. Mycorrhizae sits around the root hairs of the tree, and it helps the tree feed. Essentially,
it's fungi.
Yeah,
isn't
it's
it?
a symbi. Yeah, it's a symbiosis. So there's a real partnership between them. We did play around with putting mycorrhizae spores in the pits, but we actually stopped doing that because we didn't know if we were upsetting the mycorrhizae that's already there.
Yeah.
So yes, it's a tough one. That
You do think about it, but it's very
I
complex.
do think about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we see fallen trees, you can see those mycorrhizal sheets and things like that. It's like a real white.
Yeah.
We do think about it. We want to know more, but it's such an unknown science at the minute.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a few more questions. We might get some more from the public, but I'm going to ask a few more of my own. So, like I said, the wildlife is super important. The wildlife that trees support is so important. Are there other reasons though that we should be looking after our trees?
Yeah. So one of the things that we do as tree officers is to make sure that we've got enough trees evenly spread across a city, because it's climate change resilient, so it helps cool the city down. If you get what we call adverse weather, heavy rainstorms or windstorms, it can cushion those. Certainly in the first hour of a rainstorm, the canopy will absorb and slow the runoff. So it can slow off flood events as well. So that's a couple of reasons that the tree team actively plants trees in the city. The other thing is well-being, in terms of having really good trees or big trees in parklands for people to walk around, have respite from their daily grind. So that's really important. The list goes on, actually, because as we've evolved from trees. And whenever I do walks and talks with people and looking at trees, everybody is so involved. I used to think it was me, my personality, but it's in us. It's in us all. We all like trees. So
they're really charismatic things, aren't they? Yeah. I mean, in the UK, I was reading, I can't remember all the statistics, but there are so many statistics about the fact that we don't have as many trees as we should.
That's
and
right.
that compared to like our counterparts in Europe, like France or Germany, we really have, and pretty much every measure, fewer trees.
Yes.
Is there anything being done about that?
I would see. I thought, I think that actually, I went to a wildlife trust meeting with some farmers that were looking at wild farming, and after chatting with them, some really forward-thinking farmers, stewardships and things like that, with planting trees around the edges of fields and recreating hedgerows. That's key in the rural situations, absolutely, definitely. But also do remember that even though we have the lowest amount of canopy across the countries in Europe, we have the highest amount of veteran and ancient trees.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then some, wider than Europe. And that's because of our cultural management of pollarding and coppicing and things like that. It's the pressures of, I wouldn't say modern farming, because by the looks of it, it looks like farming's moving away, but it was the pressures of post-war farming after the Second World War, to obviously bring this country's food stock back up again. That probably lost a lot of trees. But I'm quietly hopeful. I think we're all in the same boat and we're all forward-thinking. And the other thing as well, I hasten to add, if you're living village, town or city, the best place to plant a tree is in your garden.
Yes.
And there's lots of little trees. If you've got a little garden, there's a tree for every occasion, I like to say.
Yeah.
And that's an important point. The best way to look after trees or have trees is to make sure you put one in your garden. Yeah.
I wish I had a garden. I would, otherwise, definitely. So we've got a couple more questions come in. I've got a bit of maths for you with this one.
Uh-oh.
I don't know if it's possible to do this maths. How many leaves does each tree roughly have? And that's from Finn, age 9.
Oh, again, it depends on the species. I don't actually know, but there are some answers out there. Because I went on an ancient tree forum course, and we weren't looking at the leaves, but we were looking at the secondary buds on a mature oak tree. And somebody was counting how many of these secondary buds were dropping off.
Wow.
And only oaks really, they kick out these little buds. And I think it was something like 250,000 or something. Somebody.
Cool.
So there is. I think there is a way to look up each species and how many leaves they have.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head, I've got to look after 33,000 trees. I haven't got time to count them.
How many leaves would that be on 33,000 trees if they've got 250,000 leaves each? That's a bit of maths for you maybe to try at home as well, Finn. So Sam asks, what as a tree lover would you hope for the future of trees? What would be the most important thing we can do for them?
Yeah, just essentially is actually make sure if you're going to remove a tree, it's for a very good reason. Yeah. Trees do get removed, so it's managing them sustainably. Really think about where a tree's growing, why it's growing, and if you have to remove it, why you're removing it. So that's probably the best outlook. The other tip is just to keep planting, replace lost trees.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah. So we've got another question about the walking willows. Do any walking willows or a species similar appear in countries that are not Britain? Also, are any trees especially suited to one environment, e.g. mountainous regions or more swampy areas? So we've got a bit of walking willows elsewhere and then a bit of adaptation trees.
So when the explorers went over to Australia, they took the willow with them, the British, and because of their climate, it is a problem.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's one, and it's affected their habitat. So that's one reason maybe why you should have to fell trees. Mm-hmm. But willows in that environment, they're quite a weed.
Yeah.
There are lots of different salixes all around the world.
Yeah.
The most common one in this country, or common three, are your white willows and your crack willows and the goat willows. Mm-hmm. They only really grow, with exception to the goat willow. The crack willow and the white willow only really grow in lowland areas.
Yeah.
Swampy, washlands, fenlands, places like that, next to rivers, bottom of valleys. But the goat willow is more of a shrubbier willow, and that will go anywhere where it's boggy or damp. I'd say moorlands and things like that.
Yeah.
So not so high up in mountains, though I think there is a species of willow in Scandinavia that doesn't mind mountains. So,
really?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean we often hear about like the tree line where it gets a bit too high for trees. Yeah. Yeah. Is that the case then?
That will be that's the altitude.
The altitude. Yeah. So, got some more really interesting questions. So Akbal asks, how do roots soak up water?
Again, it goes through the root hairs and that symbiosis with the mycorrhizae.
Yeah.
So essentially that's how they work together. That's essentially that is a critical part. It's through the root hairs ultimately, which are tiny, and there's millions and millions of them on the end of a root. Never mind.
So you've got a nice high surface area.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. So as much as you've got a point of root, you've even got that surface area of all the hairs around it. So essentially, that's. Yeah, and then there's a process of osmosis as well, but we won't.
It's coming close to 8 o'clock. I think we can't get too much.
The other thing I need to point out as well is that also leaves transpirate. They like kind of allow water to escape out of them. So there is a slight suction as well through the cambium and up.
Yeah.
So and that's done through the heat of the sun. Yeah, and
Fascinating. So Chris asks, are urban street trees capable of making biodiversity corridors between parkland and cities? Is there a critical density of urban street trees to achieve this?
Yes, absolutely. Green corridors. Trees do in avenues or down kind of lineal streets. Yeah, they are critical. I think as long as there is, it depends what species you're talking about in terms of how they travel. Certainly pollinators, bees and things like that. They can travel greatly, so they're looking for cover away from their prey, which is birds.
Yeah.
So I think as long as they can safely get between as
Not
quickly as
too
possible,
far apart. Yeah.
But having said that, they can stretch. Lots of wildlife can stretch quite great distances.
Yeah.
To get between canopies of trees. So I think as long as there are trees along the street line or pocket parks before you get to the parks and maybe the outskirts of the city, then you're absolutely fine.
Because I have to admit, I grew up in Sheffield, which has some fabulous street trees, and I think it makes a place just a nicer place to live.
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely.
Yeah. So Zoe asks, what tree attracts the most insects?
I'm going to go with probably the oak again.
Yeah.
Just because of its the habitat it provides. Definitely the oak.
Yeah.
But most of our, especially in this country, when you're looking at our insects, most of our natives do draw quite a few. The lime tree as well.
Yeah, I love the lime trees. Yes.
You got ghouls and all sorts of aphids by the million.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, because I always think of like sycamores where you get the honeydew coming out.
Yeah.
Sycamores, the sticky stuff.
And obviously limes do that as well. So But there's many of the native UK trees do offer good habitat for insects.
Yeah. And we've got a question from Finn that I think is a really important one. How is climate change affecting our woodlands?
Oh, without going too serious on this one, it is affecting our woodlands and it is affecting our native trees. We don't hold the ultimate answer for that. We are experimenting with non-natives, but you've got to be careful of the delicate habitat that especially our natives hold. So yes, it's a tricky one. Lime trees and hornbeam seem to be quite resilient, and there's non-native trees that are so closely related to our trees as well that I know Forestry Commission and Forest Research are looking at.
Yeah.
So yes, it's a tough one. It is a concerning one, but rest assured we're trying to look into it as quickly as we can.
Yeah. And Akbel asks, where do you find palm trees?
Anywhere far warmer than here.
Yeah, it's a bit chilly out there at the moment for a palm tree.
But no, you can get palm trees in this country, especially in Cornwall and the Scilly Islands.
Yeah.
And that's because they've got a microclimate down there. It's ever so slightly milder. So you can get them in Cornwall and Devon and places like that.
And I guess related to that, one question I've got, I guess, to finish off possibly, because it's getting close to 8 o'clock. But if you have a garden and you're planting a tree, does it have to be a native tree for it to be?
No, not at all.
Not at all.
So there's lots of lovely, let's call it Japanese cherries or non-native apple trees and things like that. That all have lovely flowers for all your pollinators and things like that. Pollinators are quite important at the minute because there's been a huge reduction of them. So no, don't get hung up necessarily on just planting native trees. Having said that, plant a native and a non-native. There you go. Have 2 trees instead of 1.
Yeah.
There's lots of little native trees that you can use. Hawthorn, anything, hazel. The list goes on.
Yeah. So we have had a couple. Oh, that one. It's just answered TP's question. What do you think is the best tree to plant in a small park or garden?
I like, I can't think of the English name. It's a little maple. It's called Acer Grisium. It's paperbark maple. There you go.
Yeah.
That's quite a petite little tree.
Yeah, I guess it has pretty leaves as well.
Oh,
anyway,
it's got a lovely tiny little leaves, and they go gorgeous red colour in the autumn.
Nice.
And it's got a orangey papery bark.
Yeah.
That's one of my favourites. I do like that. That's a gorgeous little tree.
Yeah.
Snowberry, I think they're called Amelanchier. They're quite a nice one as well.
Yeah.
They've got a lovely flower.
Okay.
There's loads.
There's loads.
Yeah.
And I think we'll finish with this one because of the time of year. If pines, firs and spruces disappear tomorrow, what other tree species would you recommend as the best Christmas tree? And that comes from Libby.
Oh, best Christmas tree. Oh, blimey. That's a tricky one because I'm thinking of tree forms now.
Because you want it to be quite
yeah,
compact,
that's what
so
I'm
it doesn't sort of
thinking.
float
Yes.
inside. Would a willow work? Because they're quite fast growing.
Yeah. No, they'd be a bit too big to put in your house.
Yeah.
Possibly, again, probably the tops of hornbeams or something like that.
Yeah.
Something conical.
Yeah.
I'm thinking.
Okay.
Yes.
There we go.
Oh no, I've got it. Birch twigs. Birch twigs because they're white and birch twigs.
Oh, that would be pretty.
There you go. Use
birch.
Yes. Birch. And
okay. Fantastic. So thank you so much for coming and joining us and sharing all your fantastic knowledge.
You're most
about
welcome.
Trees. I've learned so much, and I'm not going to be looking at the trees in quite the same way again when I go home. So that's nearly it for our Winter Wildlife live stream this year. Thank you for spending your time with us today and for all your brilliant questions as well. Now, if you want to explore trees with us some more, why not drop into the museum on Saturday? We've got loads of hands-on activities. We've got textile artist Stephanie Norwood coming in so you can learn new techniques and create artwork from sustainable fabrics. We've also got loads of other stuff. You can come into our discovery space where we'll be creating tree habitats, not out of real trees, but we can learn about some of the animals and things like that that live in trees. And why not test your memory with our J game as well? We hope to see you there if you're able to come. And we're going to finish tonight with a little love letter from our team here at the museum to the trees that we say every day. So happy winter wildlife watching.
Hi, I'm Izzy, and this willow is my favourite tree in Cambridge. I think it's really beautiful, it looks really lovely even in the winter. It's very peaceful around here with the water, and in the summer it's great because you see cows nibbling on these bits that are trailing down, which is always really adorable.
Near where I live, there's this giant redwood in this tiny little park that just sticks out from all the other trees. It's enormous, and there are no trees nearby that look even remotely similar. And it's been here a while. This park itself is small, but it's protected because the trees here have been here before the town.
I'm here in Cambridge, standing beneath the boughs of this rather magnificent
horse chestnut tree. It's in the middle of Queen's Green, and behind me is Queen's College. And as you can probably hear, we are right in the middle of town. There's lots of traffic noise going on. Some deliveries going on behind me. You might be able to hear the beeping of a pedestrian crossing. Yes, we're right in the middle of an urban area. But this is why trees are so special. When we start to look at trees, we can get transported to somewhere completely different. And it's the most fantastic tree. It's quite large, right in the middle of the green. And in the summer, it has these fabulous candelabras of flowers. In the autumn, we get the lovely, shiny chestnut brown conchas. And then towards the winter like this, we get this fabulous gnarled skeleton. Just look at all of that. It's a beautiful, beautiful tree.